Okay,
All right, I'd like to call the June 10th school committee meeting to order. The school committee will be entering into executive session for the purpose of union and non-union negotiations. The school committee will be returning to the regular open session at 7:30 PM. I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I would make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of union and non-union collective bargaining.
Okay. Nancy made the motion, second?
Second.
Jen, okay, Bill, second? All right, we'll take a poll, Ms. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Mr. Hearn,
Yes.
Ms. Gaoseth,
Yes.
and Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
Okay, we'll see everybody at 7:30, so you go to the second link. Walpole Cable, so we'll give it 10 seconds and then I'll get started. Okay, welcome everybody back to the June 10th school committee meeting. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the
the
republic,
republic for which it
for which
stands,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. For Governor Baker's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting live on Walpole YouTube. Citizens with a question or comment should email Mary Mortale at mmortale@walpole.k12.ma.us. This is actually the one time of the year when the superintendent calls the school committee meeting to order to conduct the business of asking for a nomination of a chairperson for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a nomination? Mr. Breen?
I would like to nominate Mr. Bill Buckley for chair this year.
Second.
Mark Breen nominated, second by Kristen. Any discussion? Mr. Ahern?
Thank you, Dr. Goff. Just real quick, I just want to say that I'm most likely to register a no vote on this nomination. The vote doesn't represent a disapproval of Bill or Mr. Breen for making the motion or any of those that do vote in favor of it. My no vote will represent my belief that the school committee of the Walpole Public Schools could soon be moving in a direction that's tough to correct. We're very fortunate to have 5 of our members with multiple terms in the school committee office and years beyond that as Walpole residents. That experience is extremely valuable and certainly cannot be minimized. This is especially true when it comes to understanding past practice and learning from previous decisions. However, trouble can arise when the opportunity to elevate new voices and raise up leaders is passed by. One of my personal core values is to remember and reflect on the past while preparing for the future. Preparing for the future is often spurred by voices, thoughts, and experiences that are different from or challenge the norm. I'm voting no because I think we are on the verge of entering that tough and stagnant space. After reading the room as best I can through Zoom, it doesn't appear that this is the year to do this. However, I urge us to continue to think and reflect throughout this year for the betterment of the educational experience of the students of the Walpole Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Ahern. Any further discussion? Sorry, I have to do my wait time. All right, seeing no further discussion, there's a motion made by Bill Buckley and seconded by Kristen Zyrek. So I'll do a roll call. Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Ms. Gayosis?
Yes.
Ms. Zyrek?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
No.
Mrs. Galaban?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Thank you, Bridget. I'll take it.
and with that, I'd like to
Dr.
relinquish.
Goff, Dr. Goff, just to be clear, the motion was made by Mr. Breen. You had said by Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry, the motion was made by Mr. Breen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goff. I can take the meeting off your hands now. Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues and to Mr. Ahern for his well-taken comments. I'm excited. I like the fact that there are 7 of us, and I think that's the strength of our committee is the 7 viewpoints we bring. Our next order of business is a motion for nomination of vice chair. Chair will now hear motions for nomination for vice chair from the body.
Motion.
No, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say I nominate Kristen Zyrek.
Do I have a second? Anyone?
Second.
Motion Motion by Ms. Gaotit, second by Ms. Denizio. Discussion. Other motions. Ms. Denizio. Yes?
I guess just in the context of Mr. Ahern's point, I would like to note I'm excited by the fact that this would be, from my understanding, Ms. Cyrek's first time in a leadership role on the committee. I think that she is very well positioned to step into that role. So I'm happy to second her nomination.
Further discussion. Seeing none, poll of the committee. Ms. Gaotitz.
Yes.
Ms. Cyrek.
Yes.
Mr. Breen.
Yes.
Ms. Denizio.
Yes.
Mrs. Gallivan.
Yes.
Mr. Ahern.
Yes.
Mr. Buckley votes yes. Very good. Moving on, our next order of business is the recognition of the Walpole High School valedictorian, salutatorian, and student graduation speaker. I believe we will begin with a report of that. Who will we begin with?
I can speak.
Bridget, you want to kick us off? Excellent.
Sure. So Danielle Dentremont is our valedictorian, and Nadine Byragoni is the salutatorian for the Walpole High School graduating class of 2021. In addition, Renee Abbott, Brenda Mahoney, and Edwin Ryan were the graduation speakers, along with our valedictorian and salutatorian. And here tonight are Danielle, Nadine, and Edwin, and they're present to be recognized for their outstanding accomplishments. And for those of you that I hope were able to view the graduation ceremony, it was to see the five of them. I'm wondering how all five of them were going to give their speeches. It was extremely well done, and I don't want to take their thunder, so maybe one of them can talk about how they presented this year a little bit differently than in past years.
Dr. Goff, if I could interrupt, just to let you know, I've tried allowing Danielle Dentremont. It's just not working, so I don't know if you'd like to try, just so she doesn't think I'm
Sure.
outside the room. Sorry to interrupt you.
There's Danielle.
Hello. Can you see
Yay.
me or no? There it is.
Ah, there she is. There's Edwin. All right.
Very good.
So-
Thank you for kicking us off. Congratulations to the three of you. We're grateful to have you here with us today. Would you like to speak about your experience in speaking? Tell us how hot graduation was. Go from there.
Sure, I can start. I think it was definitely a really good experience collaborating for a graduation speech, because initially we each wrote our own, and then I think we just really worked very well as a group. We all know each other pretty well because we've taken classes together for many years. And the idea of the letters, actually that was Edwin's idea. I think that helped present the speech as a more collaborative way, rather than just five of us speaking as individuals. So I was proud of what we produced. I don't know if my fellow speakers have anything they want to add.
Edwin, can you just talk about like what you did for people who may have missed the speeches, like how the five of you came together and what you talked about?
Sure. So as Danielle said, we did it in letter format. So we each took a year of high school and wrote a letter about like what went on in that year and how we felt as students. And we wrote it as like the entire class of 2021. And then we also had, since we had five speakers, we had a fifth letter that addressed the future and how uncertain it is. And yeah, so we just kind of addressed the activities that happened in each year and our general emotions towards the year, because as high school goes on, you know, our outlooks change. So we tried to encapsulate that in each different letter, and I think we each did a pretty good job at that.
Well done.
How about you, Nazi?
I think Danielle and Edwin covered it the best. I don't really know what to say now, but I agree with everything they said. It was such a wonderful experience, and it felt really good working with the four of them, because I think that was one of my favorite things to do this year, working with them on this speech, and I loved giving it to you guys. So thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. Questions from the committee for our three students? Ms. Inizio, and then Ms. Gallivan.
First of all, congratulations to all three of you. It's a wonderful achievement. I think it's so often the case that vying for this type of honor can be quite competitive, and in some cases very cutthroat and feel very individualistic. And I think what you demonstrated in the way that you decided to structure your speeches is exactly what we would hope for from our students, which is that we get farther and we have a greater impact when we collaborate with each other, and that success is not a zero-sum game. We get farther when we work together. And I think obviously, you know, each of you had the opportunity to showcase your individual talents, and you helped also collectively lift each other up. And I just think that is such a powerful message to have sent to your fellow graduates and your parents and the entire community. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Mrs. Gallagher.
Sure. I just wanted to also say, I thought your speech was incredible. I think that what many people don't know is that Walpole High only focuses on the students, that students are our only speakers at graduation. And that makes it extra special, if you ask me. I think the collaboration, as Ms. Denizio mentioned, is the thing that you're going to be remembered for. I remember one other speech that was similar from probably 7 or so years ago, where the two people interviewed all their fellow classmates and they did an audio montage. I think that yours is going to be remembered in a similar way, where you brought your whole class together, which was awesome. And my last point is, I thought it was interesting that you chose not to focus on being the COVID graduates, that you focused on many other points, but I think that was almost like an obvious, or not an obvious, but it was a conscious decision that you made, and all 5 of you seemed to go in that route, which I thought was interesting. Did you decide it together?
Yes, we did discuss that because we thought that the most expected route would be to talk about COVID. So I think we wanted to be more surprising by first being collaborative and avoiding the most obvious topic.
Awesome decision. Great decision. Nice job. Thank you.
Mr. Breen. Oh, sorry.
I have a funny little anecdote. You guys, I teach at King Philip High School in neighboring Rentham, and our valedictorian, aside from his name being Breen, no relation, he told a funny little story. When he was young, he wanted a dog, and his mother told him, well, someday if you're high school valedictorian, you'll get a dog. And he remembered it and shared that with his mother on graduation day. So hopefully you're getting something out of your parents for these recognitions as well. So.
Further questions, comments from the body? Mr. Rumbush, do you want to say something?
Sure, thank you. I just want to maybe give a little bit of background. We, as you know, over the last couple of years, we have the students and the teachers vote on who they think should be the graduation speakers. The top 5 were the 5 that actually ended up making the speech. Our intention, however, was to pick 2. And so we had each one of them write a short speech and come in front of a committee and make that speech. Each one of them was so good that we decided there is absolutely no way we can leave any of these out. And we asked them if they would be interested in all speaking together and putting something together. They rose to the occasion. And I thought that they did a fantastic job. And I would also just like to say congratulations to you all. You did a really wonderful job, and I'm so proud of you. So thank you for making the graduation ceremony a really memorable event.
Further questions? Concerns? Well, thank you three. Well done. We'll give you a Zoom clap. Hopefully the last Walpole Public Schools Zoom clap you have to ever be a part of. But we thank you and we wish you well. And please feel free to stay and listen to the rest of our meeting. But we know as recent high school graduates, there's a lot of wonderful things to do out there on this wonderful early summer evening. Congratulations again, and thank you very much for joining us. And we'll make sure, I think through Mary, to get a copy of your excellent speech included in our minutes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, our next recognition is the Walpole Police Department and Walpole Fire Department. I see Acting Chief Gallagher on the road, zooming in for us.
Yes, the school committee administration, we want to thank the Walpole Police and Fire Department for really graciously helping us out with high school graduation parade, the high school graduation, especially the parade last weekend. Their willingness and cooperation is greatly appreciated and contributed to a safe and successful parade. Present tonight is Acting Police Chief Rich Kelleher, and we just wanted to, publicly thank him for their hard work because they look forward to it. I don't know if we've created a tradition here, but they have a great time.
Mr. Keller, Deputy Chief, you'd like to?
Thank you all for having me tonight. I appreciate it. For the record, I am parked. I'm just outside my house. There's a little bit of a chaos going on in there at bedtime, so I figured I'd get some quiet out here. And now the sun's in my eyes, so this is getting awkward. But anyways, I appreciate you having me on, and it is more than our pleasure to do this. Last year worked out great for the kids. They had a lot of fun. The officers enjoyed being there, and it meant a lot to them too. So Lieutenant John White put the event plan together, and he did a great job. So a lot of thanks to him for his hard work. But I appreciate them, and I accept the recognition on behalf of the department, and I'll be sure to pass along your gratitude to them as well.
Questions? Mrs. Gallagher.
Thank you for being here tonight, Rich. I just wanted to mention that as somebody who has been on this committee for a good while, we haven't always had such a cooperative relationship with the police department overall. And, this is just one example, but you do so many things for us, and it has really made a difference in terms of how our students view the police department and how the community does. So we are thanking you for the graduation day itself, but it's for even more than that. We really just want you to know that we do appreciate the collaborative relationship that has been established over years. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much, and I know it was certainly previous Chief Carmichael's legacy to have cooperation with the community and a good relationship with the school and the young people in this community. So we're more than happy to continue that legacy as we move forward. It's a good event for us and a great way for us to engage with the kids as well. So more than happy to do it.
Other questions? Comments from the committee?
Okay, you can go back in your house now.
I might just stay here if you don't mind. But thank you, though. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Moving on, our next order of business is Walpole High School Student Report, which we will lay aside, given most of them have graduated and there's a lot of end-of-year activities going on concurrently. And move on to new business, and our first order of new business is the math consultant. Dr. Goff, Mr. Hahn, would you like to take it
Yes, David Paseggio, who's the math high school department chair, he'll introduce our math consultant, Sandra Vanderwith, Zara, and her role with respect to the math curriculum.
Good evening, everyone. I'll speak just for a moment because I'm sure you really want to hear from Sarah, as we have heard from her this week. I'm excited to share her with you this evening. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Sarah over the past couple months or so, consulting through Zoom calls, phone calls, email exchanges. And I've just grown more and more excited to be working with her and what she can bring to us at Walpole High School. Just a little background, she may expand on this more, but Sarah comes to us after 27 years in the Minneapolis public school system, where she worked as a middle school teacher, high school teacher, and the K through 12 math lead for that very large district. She, recently has been making the rounds as a nationally recognized speaker and consultant, traveling all over the U.S., running workshops, participating in conferences, and then most relevant to what we are doing, working directly with school districts and consulting with departments. Our plan was to begin this relationship with Ms. Vanderwerf this year and continue into the following year. That work began this past week, where Sarah was with us at the high school on Monday and Tuesday. She spent some time meeting with me as well as the two middle school math coaches. We got into observed classrooms, have informal conversations with teachers, and even begin some of that work Monday afternoon. And that all culminated on Tuesday with a full day workshop with the entire math department as well as the middle school math coaches. Our work is planning to be continuing again. We're going to be meeting next Friday, the 18th, for a virtual session, but to continue that work with an eye towards really getting ready to implement a lot of the strategies that we've discussed for next school year. I can say so far the response has been overwhelmingly positive. In talking with colleagues at the math department, there are teachers who are already trying to implement strategies such as around movement and student engagement. And that numerous teachers have talked about what they plan to do over the summer to be ready to implement this work this September. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Sarah Vanderwerf.
Hello, my friends. I'm going to share my screen just so you can see a little bit about the work that we did together. So I hope you can see my screen now. If for some reason you can't, just let me know. But yeah, thank you, David, for your introduction, and it's nice to meet all of you via Zoom. It was wonderful to be in Walpole for a couple days and to get to know your teachers who were great learners and were so kind and excited. And to get to see your students, I also loved just getting a taste of your school committee meeting. It made me miss working for a district when I was listening in right now.
Sarah, can I interrupt you real quick? You're coming on a little softly. I don't know if there's a way to get closer to your mic. I know some of us can not hear you as well as we should.
Which is weird because I have the world's loudest voice. Is it any better?
Minimally, not as well as it should be.
All right. Sometimes the only way I can do this is to
Okay, we can hear you now. Can
you hear me now?
Now you're coming in louder, so you could probably soften the voice perfectly now. So yes.
Okay. Thank you for interrupting me. So I wanted to give you a quick taste of what I did for a long time with your math teachers, and then I'm open to any questions that you would have. I most recently taught high school in Minneapolis schools, and I currently, though, for the last couple of years, have worked for myself as a consultant. And a couple of weird things about me, just to humanize me a little bit, is I have a calculator museum that has over 40 calculators in it that I displayed in my classroom. Someday it'll be behind me in this room. And I don't know how to ride a regular bike, which is important because I taught myself to ride a backwards bike in the last 5 years. And it taught me a lot about brain research and the research around change. And I learned how to do that in the high school that I taught at. And so I wanted to share with you just quickly a couple things about math, very, very fast, and then what I shared with the math teachers in your district. And again, I'll be open to questions. And what we know from the research in mathematics is that the learning of math is social, and that our students have to engage in reasoning every single day. Every single day they need to do that. But in the vast number of American classrooms, this is what we see. And it was happening even pre-pandemic. We give out some type of math problem, and students minimally engage in the mathematics. We see minimum engagement, and we tend to see engagement from the same few people. And the engagement we get is minimal at best. And we know from the national academies on how people learn that student learning is the most robust, the best, if students have a chance to grapple, to struggle with the mathematics before they hear explicit instruction on it. And all of that leads to this idea of engagement. And most of the engagement that people describe in American math classrooms is at best compliance, but compliance is not engagement. Compliance meaning students are taking notes, they're responding when responded to, but they're not grappling with the mathematics, and certainly not all of them. So engagement is something we create, and that's what I worked with your math teachers and leaders around, is how do we create that culture of engagement in a secondary math classroom. Now, I gave them a ton of ideas, and one of the evidence of engagement is discourse in the math classroom, and I'll tell you what all these little bubbles mean in a moment. But the reason we did this is because the research around math is that students entering your schools are likely to be like all the other students across America. It starts in elementary school that only a third of our students have a good relationship with math. It has nothing to do with grades. It has to do with their relationship with math. And about 2/3 don't really feel good about mathematics. And the research says at the end of the year, those statistics and those students are unchanged, and very little of what we're doing in the classroom affects that. So I'll tell you why, and I'll do that with my mom, Mary Vanderwerf. My mom, Mary Vanderwerf, in the pandemic has been very vibrant because she has an iPhone 12 and she's good with technology. But this is my mom's first phone. Her first phone was a party line phone. Like, I want you to think, her first phone number was long, short, and it went to only 9 other phones in her farming community. And that's who she could talk to. And I want you to think about the change my mom has had in her lifetime with phones. Many of my mom's friends struggled in the pandemic because they had not adapted to the change of the technology in their lifetime, but my mom had. And in mathematics, here's what that change looks like. When I was in school, I'm in my 50s. When I was in school, I bet a lot of you had a similar experience to me. In my geometry class, I was given something like this, and I was told that the exterior angles of a polygon add up to 360, and I wrote it down, and I memorized it, and I performed very well. I got an A in every class. I got a 36 on the math portion of the ACT. I did phenomenal, but I was part of the 1/3 who felt good about this, not the 2/3. And this is part of how America teaches math. It's called the I do. The teacher does it, then we do it together, and then you do it. But it's really us saying to our students that there's one way that we do this, and I'm asking you to think just like me and practice it that way. And here's what it's resulted in. In classrooms across America today, there hasn't been much significant change in this. We give out a problem like this, and then we see this in our classrooms. This one, by the way, is relatively new. It's from the last 20 years, but it's all over Pinterest and how we tackle that. And the challenge is, when we're teaching this, if the challenge isn't our classroom assessments, students are doing well in classroom assessments and even state assessments, because the temporary memorization of this has long-lasting effects. But then they go to something called the PISA test. The PISA test is given every 3 years. It's the way that we rank the United States against all the other countries in the world. And in literacy, we rank near the top, and then science we're a little bit lower. But the easiest fraction on the PISA test was this one. And in most countries, students got this right. It's really essentially a half plus a fourth plus 2/8, which is a fourth, which is a whole. And most of these countries reasoned it out. But when they looked at American students were trying to do the butterfly method on this twice and remember how to do things. And if you're wondering where America appears on this list, they don't appear on this list because they're all the way down below average. And if you're saying, is that new? The answer is no. We've been below average actually 2/3 of the ways down the countries for the last more than 40 years. There's not been a time in my lifetime that America's been great at math. And so when we keep saying, oh, this is working with some of our students, the students who are doing well in math in our schools are considered internationally average at best. By the way, Your state, Massachusetts, and my state, Minnesota, tend to rank 1 and 2 in math performance in the United States. We often enter the PISA as a country, and we rank a little above average. So yes, we're doing a little better job, but we're still haven't been in our lifetime getting it done. And so you might think, well, we haven't seen the butterfly in Walpole. Well, you might not have, but you see a lot of this. It's just the same thing, but without, it's guided notes, and it's telling you step by step, and it's scripts to be memorized, and it's just without the pretty butterfly. It's the same thing, and it's the teacher telling you how to do the math, and we know across the United States, students can't memorize that many scripts. So I know what you're thinking. This is a norm. I bet you're thinking this was the norm. You were, and a lot of parents ask for us to stay within this norm. They call something new math, but it's not been new math because we've known the change we need to make since the 80s. In the 80s, huge reports came out that said we need to flip this script, be more like Singapore. That's that's been at #1 for years, and other countries that have been at the top. And in those countries, we don't tell students how to do the math. We have students grapple with the mathematics, and we launch it and students explore. And the teaching appears at the end through questioning, not telling. That's problem-based instruction. It's not scary. It just means believing all of our students can solve problems and giving them the chance to try. So I gave your teachers some ways to imagine this, and it's not as scary as people make it out to be. So we want students to grapple. This is the iPhone 12 of teaching. We want to be adapting to this, and it's cool. It's easy to find this stuff. I connected your teachers with it. It's a lot of it you can find for free out there on the internet. And this is that same topic, and we just empower students, and we ask our students, what do you notice? Because math is the study of patterns, and we ask students to notice patterns. And students will talk about how all these outside angles come together in a circle, and we'll talk to them about what they know about circles. And they're making sense out of this, and the language comes from them. And when the language comes from them, they own the learning, not some of them, all of them, and they can recreate it later from these concrete visuals and concrete models that lead to the same exact stuff we learned. We were just given abstract stuff and told to memorize it. We're still leading to those efficient algorithms. They're not going away. But how we get there changes a little bit, but it's not as big of a change and should not be scary. That's the change we're asking for in your teachers. And math instruction is like everything else. As things evolve, as we learn more, as research advances, we adapt. And that's what we're asking across the United States. But I won't get into all the change theory, why it's been so difficult to do that. But really, I'll leave you with 3 more quick thoughts. Should the focus of 2021 math rooms be questions Siri can answer? And I would argue it should be, because that's not the world we're preparing for, and I have evidence of this. This is the current list of skills needed from the students you will graduate in the next couple years from the employers that will hire them. And if you look at this list, it's not students who can memorize and regurgitate information. And so I connected your teachers with this idea because there's a lot of research on how to do this. And the research says every single one of you who's listening to me right now, you were born a mathematician. These are my nephews. You were born curious and excited, but our classrooms tend to look like the bottom. But here's the good news. All of the people in this picture, all of them have something called a mathematical identity. And the research says if you tackle that, and the best research comes from a guy named Solomon, if you tackle these 5 areas, you'll start to see all students engage. And so it means dismantling things like speed in classrooms, because a lot of us don't engage because we know we can't win the race. We're just going to wait for the people that can and mimic what they do. But that's not engagement. And things like hand raising and all these other things to dismantle speed was some of what I talked about. Another thing I talked about is a lot of our students don't engage because they're so afraid to be wrong. And so I gave your teachers several that are called routines for their classroom, safe routines, meaning you can't get this wrong. So I'm going to do one final thing with you, which is to engage in my favorite routine, which is notice wonder, and ask you to notice and wonder about this. If you're brave, if you can't get this wrong, because it's just the word, what do you notice? would anybody be willing, a couple of you, to unmute and just tell me something you notice about this? And then I'll tell you what this is. I know a couple of you know what this is. Anyone want to be brave? You can't get this wrong.
It looks like a tongue.
I hear that all the time. It's the shape of a tongue, but it's not a tongue. A lot of people see those as taste buds. My guess is you're like students who see all those dots. It's the first thing they see. Second thing a lot of people see is the color purple and gold. And then they see that angle that's in there, and they see all kinds of other things. Well, this happens to be, the colors mean something. They're about made and missed shots. This is every shot that Kobe Bryant ever took in his NBA career, all 30,669. They appeared on the front of the LA Times the day he retired. And it's an awesome graphic. But they were arguing why he should be the greatest of all time. And one of the arguments was he was a balanced player. He shot from all over the field, but he actually missed more shots in his career than he made. And yet he's considered the greatest player of all time. And there's lots of other great players who only shoot from the outside or the inside. But it made me think about my own classroom. And if I think about all the lessons that a teacher will teach, if you do the math, we'll teach about the same number of lessons that the shots that Kobe took, and we're not going to get them right all the time. Your math teachers are good at some things in their classroom. All of them, all of the teachers I met, but one of the things that I offered them are other parts of their game that they could work on so they could get good at the rest. And so I encourage them that, and I want to ask you to give them the space that change doesn't come without some gold dot days. They're going to miss some things, but we know they're going to get better at this so that all students are engaged. This is the list of all the things I shared with your teachers. It's a lot, and they can't work on this all at the same time because effective change is only changing about 10 to 20% of what you do per year. So I asked them to just pick one thing. And I think it's fair game if you run into a math teacher this summer to say, hey, what's the one thing you are working on in your class? I know they're excited about it because I'm here in Minnesota, and a few of them contacted me here saying, here's what I'm working on, even though I didn't ask them to. So I'm going to stop my share. And I just wanted to give you a taste of what your teachers did with me. And if you have any questions, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll let you get on with your day. But I loved meeting your math teachers and your leaders in your city.
Question from Ms. Gailton.
I just wanted to say I thought that was a very engaging presentation, and I wish you were my math teacher back then, because I was in the 1/3 who was fairly good at it, but really never enjoyed it. And that was just amazing. So a lot of parents question how new math works. And, we were the ones who memorize things and are trying to help our children with their homework and have no idea what's going on anymore, I have to say. This gave me some faith that there's a method to the madness, even though I can't figure it out because I was a memorizer. So I thought that was great. I liked your little smiley faces. Very, very engaging presentation. So thank you.
Mrs. Gallivan.
I loved it too, Sarah. I thought, I thought you had some clever ways of getting the conversation started. One of the things that I wonder about is when you say change takes time, and I completely understand that. We've been working on doing a lot with our elementary school curriculum and training of teachers. And, I could see your method working if we're starting with the first graders. By the time they get to high school, their brains will be used to what you're talking about. But how do you work with the 9th graders who haven't had that same kind of background necessarily? And I'm not saying it's night and day, because we have been doing some very good work at the elementary and the middle school. But can you just talk about that part a little bit?
Started talking to your teachers about out because I've only taught in situations where I have students arriving to me, because I was in an urban population, where students were arriving to me not having the same mathematical backgrounds as I would hope. And the good news is the things that I shared with your teachers are meant to create independence in your students to learn. And I gave your teachers some ideas of how students will start to catch themselves up on things that they may have missed. But these safe questions, what's hidden in all your students is, regardless of what has happened to them in the past, is a mathematician waiting to get out. And all of the things that I'm sharing and working with your teachers around are meant to take students where they arrive and set them up for growth. And you'll start to see immediate growth if you commit to these things. But as the years go on, you'll start to see it happen more and more and more with more students. It is a fallacy that if a student arrives not having had these experiences, that it will be too late. I taught most recently with a lot of East African immigrants in my classrooms, many of whom lived in Ethiopia from Somalia for 5 to 7 years before they came to Minnesota. And regardless that they missed a lot of years of education and they were 18 and in my Algebra 2 classroom, we still made a ton of growth with them, regardless of those experiences. So it's not something we can't change starting wherever we start with students.
That's great. And you have ways of measuring change? So
the easiest type of measurement to look at in students, in my opinion, and I've spent a lot of time on data. I was the K-12 math lead for Minneapolis with close to 100 schools that I supported. So I've been thinking about data for years, is looking at growth data. Now, I'm not familiar with your state assessment data, but if they're like other states, they've started to have both proficiency data and growth data. And when students are I
think we may have lost you, Ms. Vanderwijk.
Just when we were getting to the data.
Of course.
She could always maybe log back on.
Would you like, if the committee would like, we can wait a second? Would you like just to proceed? Oh, here we go. Welcome back.
Here she is.
Just unmute
Just
yourself.
get it to unmute.
Please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to blame the heat. We're on day 11 of 97 degrees or higher in Minnesota, so freaking out. But ultimately, I don't know where I left off, but focusing on growth of all, not just low, medium, but high students. That's my goal, is that all students will make growth, and it's possible for happening in there. And so I would look for assessment data that measures growth. And if your state assessment data does that, that's a good way to measure success. And then from day to day, it's formative assessment. It's teachers having a chance to look at the math that their students are doing and listening to their students and responding to that. That's what's going to see growth in your classrooms.
Thank you.
Further questions for our consultant? Ms. Inizio.
More of a logistical question. I love everything that you've presented tonight. I'm just curious about the scope of your work with our district. Is it over at this time, or is there more coming?
I'll turn that over to David.
So the current plan with this, and just to speak what Sarah and I had talked about in the months leading up to this and where we are now, we're very much focused on the June launch of this partnership with Sarah, which is why we had the 2 days this week, and we had the one coming up next week. really so that teachers aren't coming in and starting the first 2 months of school with their students and then trying to change gears all of a sudden after class norms have been established and routines have been established. The plan and the hope moving forward is that we would actually be able to have a relaunch, a refresher in the beginning of the school year next year that would allow teachers to get refreshed. Again, a lot of them planning on doing this work this summer anyway. So it's going to give them a chance to get in to talk with Sarah, talk about some of the things they've done, and ask some questions, get some guidance. And then we're hoping that as needed going forward, that we could periodically still connect with Sarah. You know, we did the in-person session, but Sarah also does remote sessions, such as the one we're going to be doing on the 18th next week. So we are looking to continue this partnership moving forward so that we can see the results and get the support as needed in getting those results.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that idea of refreshers is really, really important in educator professional development. So often, you know, you're fortunate enough to get somebody like Sarah who can come in and rev everybody up and get everybody excited. And then it lasts, you know, for a small period of time. And then we never see Sarah again or hear from her, and the ideas and the energy sort of dissipates. And I think there's a lot of indicators now that to really implement something with staying power, you have a really thoughtful launch, and then you do have those refreshers so that when the teachers are in the thick of it and questions are coming up, they're not left to their own devices to sort everything out. So I'm very happy to hear that, and looking forward to seeing where we are a few months from now.
Further questions with the math department? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. We really appreciate it, and we look forward for the to the updates.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
Mr. Buckley, if you wouldn't mind, if I could just say a few words real quick before Bisseggio exits off the Zoom here. For those of you who do not know, Mr. Bisseggio has recently accepted a position at Medway High School as assistant principal. So I just wanted to take an opportunity on behalf of myself and Dr. Goff to thank Mr. Bisseggio for his last 11 years leading our math department. For those of you that do not know, Dave oversaw the changes that needed to occur as a result of the Common Core, Sarah just referred to as new math, which was a really tough time to navigate. He was instrumental in reorganizing pretty much our entire math curriculum, 6 to 12. He increased participation in SATs. He introduced benchmarking both at the middle school and just recently in the 9th grade. He also was crucial in the integration of math coaches, intervention specialists at the middle school and most recently at the high school. And I think something, if I know Dave well, like I know Dave, that he's probably most proud of is that I would be remiss to say that Dave is an absolutely fantastic math teacher. His students in the AP calculus oftentimes scored an average well above a 4 and many oftentimes a 5. So Dave, my friend, I just wanted to take this opportunity again on behalf of myself and Dr. Goff to thank you. Thank you for 11 years that you've dedicated to Walpole Public Schools and the students of Walpole, and we wish you all the very best at Medway next year.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. And I have to say, my 11 years have definitely been a tremendous learning experience for me. And I'm only ready to step into this position at Medway because of the people I had to work with in Walpole and the support I received for all 11 years. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well done. Congratulations. Moving on to next order of business under new business is a vote on non-union compensation. Dr. Goff or Mr. Fisher, would you like to begin?
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Fisher.
Please.
So I'm recommending to school committee and have built a budget on a 2.25% increase for all non-union staff within our district. And this is based on a history of systemic increases based on the WTA teachers contract. And this year is the same rationale as we've done in the past. So again, I'm recommending 2.25% increase.
Excellent, very good. Questions, comments from the committee, Mrs. Gallivan?
Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I would just make a motion to approve the 2.25% increase for the non-union staff members, most of whom do not get steps and lanes. And that's the rationale for their increase to be a little bit different from other staff members. But if you want me to hold off on the motion, I can also hold off.
The motion's in order. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gallivan, second by Mr. Breen. Further discussion from the committee? Seeing none, I will poll the committee. Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Ms. Gayotzis?
Yes.
Ms. Sarek?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley votes yes. 700. Excellent. Moving on, our next order of business, continuing working with Mr. Fisher, is the ESSER funding grant information. Take it away, Mike.
Yes, the ESSER funding. We've had 3 lines of ESSER funding this year. And the first 2 rounds of funding, ESSER 1 and 2, have been fully allocated and have gone towards salary and expenses in our district. The totals are over $1.5 million of total funding. And the ESSER 3 funding is the latest round of funding that we have to fill out a grant application for. We're hoping to receive that funding for July 1 to be applied to next year's funding to pay for staff and materials as well. It has a criteria of a 20% learning loss allocation of funding. I know Superintendent Goff and Assistant Superintendent Hahn are working diligently to get the application in for that funding source for next year. And a lot of conversations have begun and will continue, I'm sure, far into next year of how to best allocate those funds for, again, learning loss and other items of that sort. And so most of the money obviously has gone towards COVID funding. We've worked with the town collaboratively throughout this process to tap into resources that were given to the municipal side of Walpole, as well as using our funding, which was dedicated specifically to Walpole Public Schools. This has been the funding source that has gotten us through this pandemic. In many ways, we've hired many long-term sub positions. We've also funded a separate remote learning program that helped students who were obviously learning remote and were not able to come into school. It's also provided all the cleaning materials and the supplies that we've needed to get through this year from a health perspective as well. So I'm happy to kind of answer any questions about this. Most of the funding has been federal, even though it's been oversought by the DESE, our state agency for education.
Questions for Mr. Fisher on ESSER? Mrs. Gallivan?
It's not specifically related to the ESSER money, but I'm thinking about the remote learning system that we had to put in place this year. Do we have something, do we have an option that we know we're going to use if we need it for a smaller amount of students next year? Like, in other words, can we go to tech and access help if there are some children, let's say, that have medical needs that maybe can't come back into school full time? Or what's our plan for that, basically?
Bill, do you want to answer that question, or?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, Nancy, I think what we're being most cautious about is waiting till the final guidance is given. And as you already noted well, that the commissioner has said that we will be back. There will be no schools, districts are not mandated to have remote option, except, as you alluded, for students with exceptional medical issues that may keep them out of schools. And I think we're waiting even for a little bit more guidance on that, of what they will approve. We certainly will use our relationship with Tech and Tech Online as a potential option for our students. And then depending on the number of students we're talking about, I think would dictate whether or not we, engage our teachers to discuss the potential option. But we still are apprehensive to move forward with a plan until we know a little more. And that is the norm. I actually was in a job like last week, and a lot of people are in the same position. And perhaps Dr. Goff can elaborate, because I know the superintendents have been having the same conversation.
Oh, that's correct, Bill. We're waiting for further guidance from the state.
That's the reason that I asked the question. I guess what I'm wondering is, would it be helpful for the school committee to approach the state asking for something that you want? I know that there are other districts that have talked about like applying to be another remote learning provider, and I don't think we really want to do that. And if there's anything that you need from the committee in terms of us reaching out to the legislature, that's sort of the reason that I brought up the question.
That'd be great. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Mr. Ahern?
Just curious with the ESSER 3 grant, and you look forward to how you're going to put that into place through the district. Do you anticipate that lasting through the term that it's available for, or do you see needs within the district, more on the front end, or are you guys just kind of waiting to see how things play out at the start of the year?
That's a really good question, Sean. I think given the funding influx that we've had this year, what we've been able to do with the prior two ESSER grants, we've taken care of things like one-to-one and network infrastructure and hardening our entire networks and building out things that we would have taken us years to do. So we've set aside, including software as well, those things are funded and accounted for. So really the question is, to your point, what do we do with this? So we're talking about $974,000, right, of ESSER 3 funding. I think that's where Superintendent Goff and Assistant Superintendent Hahn are meeting to discuss amongst our central leadership team, as well as our principals and teachers as well, what is the best allocation for this funding? Where, given what we've taken off the table, now what do we do? It's kind of like phase 2 of this massive influx of funding. So I don't know if I've answered your question specifically, but it's really, there's a lot to talk about going forward. This summer will be when the conversations really begin.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I think I should have just asked about whether the conversations have begun or not. It was a little more complicated question on my part than it should have been. But your explanation just raised another point that you guys have done as a district administration team, a great job of collaborating. You've been prudent where it's been necessary. You've made quick decisions with the funding to help our students have the best learning experiences possible. So another kudos to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Further questions on ESSER? Just as we move on, I just want to thank you, Mike. I know every pot of money has a different set of guidelines and a different set of reporting standards, and a different scope slightly from a different organization with different oversight. So you're good at juggling. We know that. But this is a good update, and hopefully maybe we'll have a few more of these in the fall rather, just kind of to get our hand around. There'll probably be ARPA updates as well that you'll have for us. Excellent. Moving on, our next order of business is superintendent's report. Dr. Goff.
Thanks. So as you know, we're approaching the last week of school. The last day for students is June 17th. We're grateful to the staff who continuously adjusted to the needs of our students during this unusual year. Just families should please check emails in the coming days for any updates from the students' principals regarding the last days of school. As we had mentioned, on Sunday, June 6th, the Walpole community celebrated our 147th commencement ceremony to honor Walpole High School's graduating senior class of 2021. I just want to publicly thank all of the staff and volunteers who made this such a special occasion. We are incredibly grateful for their hard work to ensure that this was a memorable day. As I mentioned before, a special thank you to the Walpole Police Department and Fire Department with their support for this community event, because the parade would not have been possible without them. Most importantly, thank you to the class of 2021. This year has presented us with many challenges, but you continued to rise to the occasion and represented our community with pride and integrity. It was an honor to congratulate our seniors and give them the recognition they deserve. We wish them well as they embark on a journey filled with new opportunities and new challenges. It goes without saying that this year was unique. I could have never imagined my first 2 years as superintendent would include a global pandemic, remote learning, hybrid learning, and constant mandate changes. However, I remain grateful and humbled by working with so many great students, staff, and families. It has been an honor to serve as your superintendent. Finally, I'd like to congratulate our amazing 2021 retirees. I'd like to recognize these dedicated individuals for their years of service to Walpole Public Schools and thank them for enriching the lives of our students, and we wish them a happy retirement. Ann Arpin, Director of Digital Learning. John Benedetto, our district van driver. Larry Blaze, Walpole High School custodian. Maureen Carty, Elm PE teacher. Tricia Clifford, Bird Middle School science teacher. Pat Cannell, Fisher kindergarten teacher. Lisa DeMarco, Bird Middle School moderate special needs teacher. Judy Feldman, extended day site coordinator. Charlie Farrow, Walpole High School psychologist. Bob Fonseca, Bird Middle School custodian. Holly Francer, speech and language at Fisher. Ann Grilly, Boyden grade 5 teacher. Christina Kalifarsky, Bird Middle School math teacher. Susan Maragay, Johnson Middle School educational support professional. Neil McCormick, Elm Street custodian. Willa McKee, Walpole High School art teacher. Ellen Newman, Elm and Daniel Feeney Preschool nurse. Yasuko Noto is their district food service technician. Lynn Rowan, our software application specialist. Katie Ryan, Daniel Feeney Preschool speech and language teacher. Karen Sweeney, Elm Street School secretary, and Marianne Zazula, Old Post Road reading teacher. Again, we thank them and wish them a happy retirement.
Very good. Unfortunately, even as we come out of COVID, we don't have the retirement parties to go to, which are such a wonderful culmination for the service of so many in our community. Questions for Dr. Goff? I just have just one, and you touched upon it previously. As we look to, I know we don't have our next school committee meeting is June the 24th, but we're obviously following closely what type of meeting that will be, kind of contingent upon the governor's executive order being elongated. That will allow us to continue to Zoom. I know Mrs. Galvin had kind of touched base with a few of us to see. I assume you're talking with the town manager, see what the select board is doing. I believe they are returning, and they're meeting downstairs in the old senior center. Is that correct? With sort of continued social distance.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so, Bill.
Excellent. So that's just something we keep on the radar. Make sure.
Yes.
Seeing no further questions, moving on. Old business. Vote on capital requests. Mr. Fisher again. You muted Mike.
Sorry about that. So enclosed in your packets was a list of capital items and totaling, I believe, $670,000. And the list, I mean, just to summarize it, the list contains items from starting with central office, some of our larger items that span the entire district. It includes technology for switch repairs and replacements, some food service items, I'm just kind of highlighting these. I'd be happy to answer any questions about them specifically. We have one of the scoreboards for athletics program, and then some work at the Walpole High School. Some of these items will fall within the school department, which is traditional directly school-related items. And some of the items on our capital list are DPW-related, build-out infrastructure of the school buildings. These are items that we talked to, the superintendent and I talked to the town administrator about this, and the building superintendent, Don Anderson, as well. And I've labeled those on there as DPW. So those are items that I anticipate will be funded by the town, or at least vetted by the town. We will clearly speak to support them, but that's really going to fall more on the building superintendent to support that. Each one of our school buildings has an item on here, except for Bird Middle School. The rationale there is that, it's a building that we're hopeful will be replaced by a new middle school. And for that reason, there aren't any items on here for Bird Middle School in particular. So I would be happy to answer anyone's questions about this. This is a large capital request, and I'm hopeful that we have the support of the town on getting many of these things.
Pardon me, I muted myself. Mrs. Gallahan?
Mike, is your thinking that this is a multi-year list?
Yes, great question, Nancy. So what we'll do with this list is it lists as a one-year request, but my intention is that in all likelihood, every item on here will not be funded, but the town wants a 5-year capital look forward. And so some of these items will wind up on, years coming as we move forward into the next 5 years. That 5-year plan is something that they review on the town side, and we look at as well, to see that we're accounting for our needs as we move forward.
I thought so. One of the things that I was thinking about recently is there was a point where we really just had to focus on technology because there was a limited amount of money and a great need. And obviously, we need to pay attention to security, which was another big thing a couple of years ago. And then building maintenance, it falls into this. But what I'm wondering about is more curriculum related things. Does the potential exist to have some of them be on this list also? Like, I remember hearing about some elementary school students who made a good pitch for the fact that there should be a science lab at their school. I know we talked about wanting to do hydroponics at both the middle and the high school level, and we couldn't build that into the building project because it's not a current project. On the other hand, I don't think we should just forget about those ideas. And I'm wondering if like a hydroponics lab or a science lab for each of the elementary schools should be something that we think about, especially if this is a multi-year list.
So I think that's a very good point. We tend to focus on the immediate, and I think that there was some resistance to capital items of like textbooks and things of that sort. And I kind of understand that, but I think the items you mentioned are very appropriate for a capital list. And generally we say 10,000 or more. So if it falls within that realm, and even if it's a single school isn't 10,000, but you have multiple schools that add up to that, that would be a way of funding things of that sort through capital. So I'm open to it. I'd love to talk to Assistant Superintendent Hahn about, ideas, and Superintendent Goff about curriculum related expenses that you guys would like to consider. That would be fine and appropriate.
Yeah, I think going forward, there are a lot of things that they may be costly, but they might be worth at least putting out there. I'd like to be able to teach more about wind and solar management, for example. So I think there are a lot of things within the science technology. The math consultant just gave me some thoughts too about how you support that real conceptual thinking. So, I like what you have here, and I think it's good, but I may, especially if we're looking at it as multi-year, I'd like to have the chance to add to it a little bit.
Great, okay.
Other questions for Mr. Fisher? I just have one. Looking at the document, refresh my memory. I hate to belabor this. Under athletics, the Bird Middle School scoreboard. Those scoreboards do not say Rebels on them, do they?
They do not. I checked that. I think that was a very good question I hadn't thought of. I checked with the athletic director, and both scoreboards are between 15 and 20 years old, do not have Rebels on them. They're controlled by remote controls, which have failed in at least one case. So these are really antiquated systems that really could use a replacement and do not have the Rebel name on them.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Breen?
So are we going to replace the Bird Middle School scoreboard, did you say?
It's a scoreboard at Bird Middle School. So the field complex has multiple scoreboards associated on the fields. So I only used Bird as a location of the scoreboard, and it's not directly related to Bird Middle School.
Okay, because again, we're doing the building project. It would, we wouldn't want to put up a scoreboard and then tear it down in a year and a half. So.
Right.
Anything further on the capital plan? We have a motion to approve the capital plan.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Galvin, second by Mr. Nizio. Any further discussion? Seeing none, poll the committee. Ms. Sirek,
Yes.
Ms. Nizio,
Yes.
Mr. Ahern,
Yes.
Mrs. Gallivan,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley, yes. And good on you, Mike, for trying to get a couple of vans every year. One of these days, you're gonna get there, man.
We talked about failure earlier. I think that applies to that one.
That's good stuff. Great stuff. Moving on, we have middle school building project update. Mr. Breen, chairperson of the school building committee, would you like to take us?
Very good. So our next school building committee meeting is the 22nd of this month, and that'll be a big one because the big item on that agenda will be a more granular look at the cost of the building. We have it being professionally estimated. So the number that's been out there now, the $115 million, has been a professional Mile High estimate. We'll have by the 22nd a professional granular estimate again, I guess. So that's sort of the next big milestone. So stay tuned.
Excellent.
Mr. Buckley may chime in.
Superintendent, Dr. Goff, please.
For those of you that were at the community forum, you received an email, and for those of you that were there at school building committee, you heard this, but I just feel that it's important to state again that, as many of you are aware, the end of our community forum was interrupted by a disturbing situation in which an unknown person Zoom bombed our webinar by shouting and typing racial slurs. Although the person was quickly removed from the webinar and the chat was disabled, it was realized that the chat was not able to be removed from our view and the meeting ended. This was a very upsetting incident for both the violation of boundaries and because of its racist and offensive content. We denounce the language that was used and refuse to let our platform be used for hate speech. We want our community meetings, both in person and virtual, to be safe and free from discrimination and hateful speech in all its forms. The town of Walpole and school district are investigating the incident, and it's been reported to our local authorities. The middle school building project team will evaluate any future forums and public access during virtual meetings. And I believe, Mr. Breen, that when we hold the next community forum, we'll be able to hold it in person.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well said, Dr. Goff. Anything else on school building? Seeing none, we move on to subcommittee activities. We did have a workshop, school committee goals workshop on Monday, the 7th of this week. Would anyone like to kind of begin to report on what we were doing? I'm happy just to speak in a general way. We had a really good discussion about, as we've said when we did our superintendent evaluation, we talked about goal setting earlier, being very deliberative, as we always are, but really kind of focusing. Obviously, we have a pretty big capital goal with the middle school, but also kind of elevating where our goals around inclusion of students and student achievement and communication with the community are. And I think we did a lot of great work led by Mrs. Gallivan to begin to distill that vision and create a document that can really guide us through the year, which is going to be a very busy year, and a year of, I think, a lot of aggressive work on behalf of this committee and our administrators. So stay tuned as we continue to hone that. But I think there was a lot of good work done on Monday. Other subcommittees that have met since our last meeting? Dr. Goff, are there any? There are none?
No, I do not see any.
Very good. Seeing none, does any member have anything to say on subcommittees?
I have just looking at the agenda, Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
When we did the vote, I think we missed one of the votes. Let me just look at my schedule. I think it was CAF. Do we want to do that now or save it until the 24th? You want Mike to address that tonight?
I have under the posting, under the vote on non-union compensation, I have one vote. I don't have a cafeteria vote.
Okay.
It is not posted.
Okay.
Through you, through myself, to Mr. Fisher, is that something that we can vote on the 24th? Being abundantly cautious.
Yes, I hope to do it tonight, but I realized it wasn't on the agenda. So we can put it on the 24th, and I think we had a very good conversation tonight, and that would be fine.
Excellent.
Okay, we'll make sure it's on that. Thanks.
Good work done on it. We'll make sure we dot our T's and cross our I's. Moving on, citizens' comments. I think Dr. Goff, you spoke to the fact that there's no attendees currently, and we will be doing that via kind of written communication for the near future, unfortunately. Can we move on to approval of warrants? Mr. Hart?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packet. Warrant number 221048 and 221049.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Denizio. Poll of the committee. Ms. Sarek?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley votes yes. Would someone please like to take donations?
I have
Oh, you have another
payroll.
one. Fair enough.
Yes.
I'm looking right at it. Keep going.
Good. I would also like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrants. 21 for the amounts listed in your packets. Warrant numbers 2146PA, 2148PA, and 2148PB.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Denizio. Ms. Sarek?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Buckley votes yes. Now would someone like to take donations?
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations. To Walpole High School, a baby grand piano from National Amusements Showcase for Good program, $11,000. To Boyden School from Marquise A. Holmes for the Multicultural Books Initiative, $800. And to Boyden School from Sharon Credit Union for the Multicultural Books Initiative, $50. And lastly, to Fisher School and Old Post Road School from Bay State Textiles Recycling in the amount of $140. Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizio, seconded by Ms. Sarek. Poll of the committee. Ms. Sarek?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Buckley votes yes. You saw the picture of the baby grand there in your notes. That's good stuff. Would someone like to take the minutes, please?
Sure. I make a motion to approve the regular school committee meeting minutes for May 27th, 2021.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Sarek, second by Ms. Zanizio. Poll the committee. Ms. Sarek,
Yes.
Ms. Zanizio,
Yes.
Mr. Ahern,
Yes.
Ms. Galligan,
Yes.
Ms. Gaeltitz,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley votes yes. If we go back in person, we can all just raise our hands again, which will be nice. There being nothing further on the agenda, Mr. Breen,
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion by Mr. Breen, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Sarek,
Yes.
just raise your hands. Excellent. Out we go. Thank you very much, all.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Have a good
everyone.
night.